What's going on, everyone? River60 here, back with another tutorial for the SFM Plus flight model update for the Project Hatchet H-60 for Arma 3. Today we're going to be looking at the gremlin that's been killing all of your rotors. That's right, we're talking about engine torque today, and I'm going to show you how it all works and how to prevent yourself from damaging your rotor. Better late than never, right? In this video, we're going to show you how different configurations affect your required torque, and I'm going to tell you exactly what your limitations are and what it looks like when you break it. Today's lesson will be presented in SFM Plus with the stabilator simulation enabled, and I will be using HOTAS for my controls. Additionally, this video is using one of our QA builds for an upcoming hotfix, so you may notice some differences. Let's get after it. I'll see you on the flight line. Alright guys, so we're in Tanoa today, and we are in the northwest at Tuvanaka Air Base, and it is just a gorgeous day out today. We got skies clear, not a cloud in the sky, a very toasty 15 degrees Celsius on the free air temperature gauge, and just really ideal conditions to be doing hovering, as well as showing off all our torque values. Now, I will say that environmental factors are not calculated in the torque values at this point in time. However, it's a really nice day, and I just wanted to point it out. So we're here using the 0.5.2 build, which is our first hotfix since the initial release of SFM Plus. And helping us out today, we got my crew of 4 in the UH-60 Mike Blackhawk here, just chilling. We've got a squad of 11 NATO troops out to my left, waiting to get loaded up a little bit later. And to my right, we have the MH-60 Mike DAP Hawk, which will be demonstrating the various attack configurations and their associated torque values. Now, let's talk about torque. So, engine torque is simply a measurement of how much power you're demanding from the engines to achieve a flight profile that you want. Now, for all intents and purposes of ARMA, engine torque is a direct reflection of what your collective is doing. So, if we look down at my collective here, if I increase collective, I'm asking for more power. If I decrease collective, I'm asking for less power. Now, in the vanilla Arma 3 advanced flight model, there's usually a gauge that indicates how much collective you have applied, which our mod used to use in the past with a C gauge that you probably remember here, which has since been replaced by NP1 and NP2. We'll go over those at a different time. However, with this new engine simulation of SFM Plus, we can use engine torque as an indication of what the collective is doing. So the old C gauge and that third torque gauge were ultimately redundant and you didn't need them. So in build 0.5.2, you will no longer see the third torque bar or the collective bar here. Instead, you will see NP1 and NP2. And to get a gauge of what your collective is doing, you can pay attention to Q1, which is torque of engine 1, and Q2, which is torque of engine 2, on either your ECAS or your power pod, Q1, Q2. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get the engine started and show you the gauges in action here. So we're going to first check to make sure that we have the three things for engine combustion. So our air source heat start switch is set to APU. Our fuel selector levers are going to direct. And our engine ignition switch is on. So we have spark, we have fuel, and we have air. And we are clear on 1, engaging the number 1 starter. We got the starter light, blades are turning. NG is on the rise, waiting for it to hit about 20%. And TGT is below 30, advancing 1 to idle. Got a positive rise in TGT and MP1. And starter drops out, red X goes away, and TGT is coming back down. That's a good start on 1. Now in 0.5.2, we did add the idle detents back into the power control quadrant here. So your power control levers can go from off to idle to fly. So make sure you guys are putting your levers back to fly before you take off. Now, another thing I want you guys to note is number 1 engine's torque. About 14% right now, because number 1 engine is the only one that is working to turn the blades. So watch what happens when we turn number 2 on. So we're clear on 2. Number 2 starter is engaged, NG is on the rise. About 20%, TGT is below 30, advancing 2 to idle. And we got a positive rise in NG, TGT, and NP2. Starter drops out, red X goes away, TGT is coming back down. Good start on 2. Now, you can see that the torque values between 1 and 2 are now split evenly. This is what's known as torque matching and load sharing. So while both engines are running, they're going to attempt to match each other's torque. In the event that another engine goes out, the opposite running engine will then take all of the workload, which will also increase your limitations for your torque values. And that's something we'll go over later in this video. But I just wanted you guys to see the torque matching in action there. So, good start on 1 and 2. We're going to go ahead and put 1 and 2 to fly. So 1's at fly, 2's at fly. We have the number 1, number 2, and low rotor cautions go out on the master warning panel. And NP1, 2, and NR are all at 100%. So we're going to go ahead and do fuel pump switch off, APU control switch off. So our APU is off, and we're going to do our before takeoff check. So 2 to fly, systems in the green, avionics are as required, which they are not, and crew packs, if we had any, are secured. So we're going to go ahead and hover over to the runway so we can do some demonstrations of hover torque, and I'll see you over there. Alright, so now that we're on the runway and ready to take off, first thing we're going to go over is hover torque. So hover torque is divided into 2 categories. You have in-ground effect and out-of-ground effect. Ground effect is defined as 1 rotor diameter from the surface. So if you're within ground effect, you're lower to the ground. If you're out of ground effect, you are higher off the ground. Now when you are out of ground effect, when you are higher off the ground like that, it requires more power to be able to maintain a hover. When you're in ground effect, the proximity to the ground is assisting you in creating somewhat of a cushion so that it requires less power for you to hover. And we're going to demonstrate that here in both a clean configuration like you see here, as well as a heavier configuration with packs on board, and we'll show you the differences here. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to take off. So we are 4 crew, no packs, clean configuration, nothing special on this 60 to add any extra weight. And we're going to go ahead and start pulling in our power. So in this configuration, I'm predicting about 57 to 62% on the torque. And I'm also expecting to get light on the wheels at about 50%. So I'm at 49, 50, light on the wheels. Gonna add a little bit of left cyclic and a little bit of left pedal to assist it when taking off. And we're coming up. And we come straight up. Now I'm gonna hover around 20 feet AGL. So I'm looking at the radar altimeter there on the bottom right. And let's see if I can't get a stabilized hover going. Alright, so I'm holding at 22 feet. I'm zeroed on the VSI, so I'm not climbing or descending. And I'm hovering at around 58%. So I'm within the range that I predicted. And that is about right for the configuration that I'm in. So I'm going to use this tower as my hover point here, and then also looking at the taxi lines to try to maintain a stable hover. So now I'm going to go ahead and climb out of ground effects. I'm going to climb to about 100 feet AGL. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my power and try to come as straight up as possible without using any hover symbology. So we'll see how good I really am. And we're passing 100 feet now, so we'll go ahead and arrest that. Alright, so we are now out of ground effect, and I'm got a generally stable hover, I think. A little bit of drift. But we're hovering now at 67%, so you can see that ground effect is modeled correctly here, in that it is requiring more power from my helicopter to be able to hover at these higher altitudes. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring it on down, and I'm going to come right over to the taxiway here so we can get our packs loaded up. And we're going to hop in Zeus and have them load up here. Alright, so we're now fully loaded, 11 packs in the back, about 250 pounds each, if I had to guess. So a pretty significant weight increase, which means a significant power requirement for us to hover. So we're going to go ahead and test that out now. So, same thing. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling in my power. Now I'm going to get all the way to where we were before, and I'm going to show you the changes here. So I'm already at 53, coming up on 54, 55. This is about what we were hovering at before, and you can see that we haven't even gotten light on the wheels yet. So continuing to increase. %, I can see we're a little bit light on the wheels, so I'm going to go ahead and add that left cyclic and a little bit of left pedal. And increasing the power still, 64, 65, 67, and we're off the ground. I'm going to go ahead and tail right so I can get my reference back, and we're just going to slide over to the runway again, just for consistency. So it already definitely feels heavier. It's a little bit slower to respond to my movements. But I'm holding at about 20 feet now, just trying to get that stabilized hover going and correcting for drift. But just under 20 feet, and I'm hovering around 68% in ground effect. Now, we're going to go ahead and get out of ground effect, so I'm going to add some power, try to get a climb going. Looking for 100 feet again. We're passing through it now. So, let me rest that rate of climb. Make sure that VSI is zeroed out. So we're pretty well out of ground effect now. And looking at 84% on the torque. to hover out of ground effect with 11 packs in the back. So that's to demonstrate the different power requirements and how weight factors into your performance planning, so that you can't just yank a bunch of torque when you need to take off with a bunch of guys. You're going to need to take it nice and slow and make sure that you're minding your power requirements. Now we'll go over all the limitations later, but first we're going to switch over to the DAP Hawk. We're going to go through different weapons configurations as well as throwing packs in the back so you can see the torque values associated with the DAP. So I'll see you guys over there. We'll be booted up, ready to go, and we'll just jump right into it. Alright, so we're all spooled up in the DAP here. I'm just going to show you our configuration. So right now we got the rockets on the right and the 30mm on the left. This is the default configuration for the DAP when it spawns. I have just my co-pilot, no crew members or any packs in the back. And let's go ahead and see what our hover torque is. So go ahead and pull in my power. Now comparing to the UH, I'm already at 55, 56, 57%, which is about the same values of the UH when it was fully loaded with 11 packs in the back. So you can already tell that the DAP by default is already heavier. So continuing to pull in that torque, getting light on the wheels, about 60%. A little bit of left cyclic, left pedal. Coming straight up. Get my hover reference point here, the tower. And I'm within ground effect. Let me just stabilize my hover here for a sec. And we're looking at 68% on the torque in ground effect. Now let's check out of ground effect. Starting my climb. And well above 100 feet now. Stopping my climb. Attempting to stop my climb, I guess. Alright, we're relatively stable, got a little bit of forward drift, but we're hovering around 83% on the torque. So this is just the DAP Hawk in its standard default configuration. So now let's see what happens when we load it up with Hellfires. When it comes to weapons, the weights are not going to change quite as significantly as it will when you add packs. So we should expect to see relatively the same numbers. Pylons, and we're going to select the 114 kilos that are from our mod, as to make sure that everything is kosher. Okay, okay. We now have Hellfires on both. Starting with in-ground effect. 55, 60, light on the wheels. 65, 66, 67, and we're back up. So as predicted, about same numbers to get us off the ground. And to keep us in a hover. 68%, 16 feet. Coming out of ground effect. And 100 feet. Trying to use my references to stay relatively still. And look at about 83, 84% on the torque. So not much change between all Hellfires and the gun and Hydras. But now, for the configuration that a lot of the smaller units tend to use the DAP for, what I like to call the battle wagon. So we're going to do all Hellfires, and then we're going to go ahead and load our 10 packs up. And we're going to see what numbers we get. Alright, all 10 packs, all Hellfires, in ground effect. Let's see what it is. So I am at 67%, which is what we were picking up with earlier. Not even light on the wheels. Alright, 70%, about light on the wheels. Continuing to pull. 79%, maybe 80. Getting my hover reference point. It's about 81% in ground effect. Now let's see what out of ground effect is. Starting my climb. At 96, 97, 98. $102. Alright, we're well above 100 feet, so let me stop my climb. And we're hovering around 95%, 96%, 97%. So looking at high 90s with all the packs in the back and weapons and full fuel. So this is why we wanted to highlight the DAP in this video, because we know that the battle wagon configuration is convenient, but we wanted to add a limiting factor to it to make sure that it is not this OP one-size-fits-all solution. So next, we're going to go over your actual torque limitations and the numbers that you need to pay attention to. So we'll get lined back up on the runway, and I'll see you there. Alright, so let's talk numbers. We're going to stay in the DAP Hawk with the Hellfire and packs in the back configuration, because this will give us the smallest power margin, which will allow us to bust our torque limits a little bit easier, so I can demonstrate it a little bit quicker. So engine torque in the 60 is divided into 3 different profiles, if you will. You have below 80 knots indicated, above 80 knots indicated, and single engine. Each of these categories have their own limitations, so this is something you'll need to pay attention to when you're flying a mission. I'll put the numbers on the screen as I read them. I would suggest writing them down for reference later. So, if you are below 80 knots indicated airspeed, your torque limits are 0 to 120% continuously and 120 to 144% for 10 seconds. If you are above 80 knots indicated airspeed, your torque limits are 0 to 100% continuously and 100 to 144% for 10 seconds. If you're ever operating on a single engine, regardless of airspeed, your torque limits are 0 to 135% continuously and 135 to 144% for 10 seconds. So let's see that in action. So I'm going to do a rocket takeoff here, collective into the armpit. Power's coming up. I'm already above 100. I'm going to keep pulling in that power. 120%, 125, I'm in the red. Alright, let's go get some forward airspeed now. Now, as I get the forward airspeed, you'll realize that the power requirement starts to go down as I gain that forward airspeed. And it's because the rotor is operating a lot more effectively and doesn't require as high of a power setting when in forward flight. Alright, so we're at 86 knots, 87, so I can go ahead and show off going above 100%, right there, in the red. Coming back down. Now for single engine, I'm going to go ahead and get some altitude. Now, as we talked about before, the engines have a feature called torque matching and load sharing. So when one of the engines goes out, they're no longer sharing, you're going to see the torque on the good engine double. So if we were to keep this power setting, we would expect to see the torque to jump up to about 128%. So since I'm at a good altitude now, I'm going to lower that power setting a little bit for cruise flight. And we're going to get some airspeed so we can get that power setting down a little bit more. Alright, we're above 80, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the number 2 engine off. Alright, so number 2 engine's off. You can see that my torque has shot up to about 102% now, but you see I'm still in the green. Airspeed doesn't matter. And then I go ahead and pull in more power until I get to 135%, and now I'm in the red. So if you lose an engine, you have all the way up to 135% torque to try to get yourself out of a bad situation. So I'm going to turn around, and then let's go ahead and get the engine started again. So I'm going to level out here. We're going to do a crossbleed start, so I'm going to switch my air source to engine, so it pulls air from the engine itself. We have fuel, we have spark, and we have air. Hitting the starter. And advancing to idle. Alright, and number 2 is started, and then let's advance 2 to fly. So you can see that when number 2 is at idle, that torque matching won't happen because the NPs are too far apart. So the power on number 2 engine is way too low for it to try to match. So you have to get the other engine to fly before you can get that torque matching back. There we go. And now we're showing the same. So now let's demonstrate what actually happens if you do bust your torque. So we're going to head back to the airfield. To get ourselves set up for a landing. Now, as you saw, the parameter tapes will turn red once they reach that 10-second limit. Now, when it comes to these 10-second limits, the timer is not cumulative. So if you enter the 10-second range and exit it before the 10 seconds is up, the timer resets. You will only incur damage under one of 2 conditions. If you remain within the 10-second range beyond 10 seconds, or if you exceed the back end of the 10-second range, which is 144% in all cases, for any amount of time. Now, when the damage is applied, it's applied to the main rotor, and it's applied over a total time of 30 seconds after achieving either of those conditions. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the red tape. And now I'm going to just stay there. As damage is incurred, you're going to receive an audible beep to inform you that you're taking damage, as well as you'll hear a knocking sound from the engine. Alright, so we got our beeping sound, and now we have a warning here. Chip main module sump. You will receive that warning upon reaching 50% rotor damage, and that caution will display on your ECAS. After 30 seconds of incurring damage, your main rotor will just stop turning. At 100% damage on the main rotor, it will stop turning. And in case you were wondering, there are no auto-rotative capabilities in SFM Plus at this point in time. So if you want to remain able to auto-rotate your helicopter, if you lose your main rotor or lose both your engines, you'll still need to fly in the advanced flight model. Alright guys, that concludes our tutorial for understanding engine torque in SFM+. First, I want to apologize for getting this video out so late, as I know the overtorque issues have been plaguing you all since release. I realize this was probably a lot of information to throw at you, and I hope that I made it somewhat easy to understand. Main thing you need to take away from this video is that if your torque goes into the red, you need to exit those conditions to avoid taking damage to your helicopter, so pay extra attention to your torque gauge. We hope that this flight model change adds a bit more of an edge to your flying and adds an extra layer of realism that is still enjoyable. Thanks for watching, this is H-60 and happy flying. See ya!